Welcome everybody to ISA Presents Finding Your Niche. We are here with writer, director, producer, old friend of mine, Sean Abley. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you for having me. My gosh, it's so great to actually see you after all this time.
No, I see you on social media and I'm like, wait, I feel like you are my friend.
Right, isn't that crazy?
I know, so weird. Upcoming events that you guys should be aware of. On May 6th, the next month, we're doing another ISA Presents, and we're talking to Mickey Daughtry and Tobias Iaconis. They are the writing team who wrote 5 Feet Apart, that mega YA hit, Curse of La Llorona, and Night Books, which is amazing. If you haven't seen that on Netflix, it's awesome. And then also after that, on May 19th, we're doing ISA's virtual pitch panel, where we are going to be listening to 5 90-second pitches that we're judging now. And we'll have a panel of industry pros who are going to immediately critique those. And you guys should watch, because if you don't know about pitching, it's a great way to learn about what goes into a short pitch. I know these are only 90 seconds, but it's great because if you're a writer, you're going to have to be pitching no matter what. So might as well start learning now if you don't know. So that's all of that. And now we are going to get started. Okay, so Sean and I met 15-ish years ago. We were both working on a reality show called She's Got the Look. It was for TV Land, and it was a modeling competition for older women over 35. I thought it was 40, but Sean reminded me earlier it was 35.
I think our oldest was 70. Remember? One of them was 70.
Dolores.
Oh,
it was a lovely show, but Sean was working as a writer. I was a producer, and I know that we both, had our problems on the show because of all shows. It's like draining. But I remember being envious of you because I was like, man, I'm so tired and we're doing all this work and Sean's just gets to write, like punch up this script. And I was like, I need that job.
It was so, I got to tell you, I was just actually talking with my husband about this just today, mainly because all this stuff about America's Next Top Model is coming out, but also, which, I can affirm, but I had sort of invented that job back then, right? Like it's kind of gone now. I was writing and I'm sure we'll get to this about how I got into reality, but they didn't really have writers, but they suddenly started deciding they would hire me to write for the host and, punch up things and things like that. And so it was this job that existed for 5 years, which has now been sort of absorbed into producer, editors, editors, which is the thing that didn't exist back then. Remember, there was no editor.
I know.
What was that? Anyway.
That's funny you say that because I was watching the show last night on Netflix, the Tyler Henry show. Okay. He's like the Hollywood medium.
Yeah.
And there was this segment, and this is a total segue, we're going to get back into it, but there was this segment where it showed him in his kitchen trying to make brownies or something. And I was watching it and I was laughing and I was like, if people don't think reality shows are written, then this is a moment, because what they're trying to show you in a subtexty way is that he's not smart enough. He's not savvy enough to even know how to make boxed brownies. So there's no way he could go and research behind the scenes of people's past and knowing who died in their life and all that stuff. It was totally on purpose. And I was like, I mean, if you don't think that these shows are written, come on. Oh. Anyway, even though it was a reality, it was a real scene. It was just, that's what they were trying to show.
End to end.
Although
I will say the competition was fair because I was in the room when they would make the decision about who got to go home. And it was a huge, so if anybody ever thinks it was rigged, it really wasn't. It was the only one that was remember, we got rid of our Dolores, our 70-year-old, the day before she would have had to do a stunt challenge.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I feel like that was being kind, actually.
Yeah. The drama we didn't need. Anyway, okay. So let's start with, first of all, the reason we're doing this talk with Sean is because Sean has worked in many, many, many different aspects in the writing field, producing, directing, Obviously, we just talked about writing on reality shows, writing screenplays, playwriting. I mean, we'll get into all the things, but I feel like Sean is a really good person to talk about sort of finding that placement, that thing that you really love, that niche of who you are and what you want to write, and sort of exploding that outward into many different areas. It doesn't just have to stay in one little zone. But I thought it would be really good because a lot of writers that I speak to within ISA and outside are always concerned about, do I have to be genre specific? Do I have to stick to this one little space? And for some people, sure, maybe that's your path, but I don't think you have to. So that's kind of why we're here talking to Sean. So let's first talk about what you're doing now. And then we'll go backwards and start with like how you started and kind of found your way through the industry. So what are you doing now?
So right now, it's interesting because it's, for me, it's really like these circles, right? Right now, my main focus is actually being a playwright and a journalist. And that's what I started out as, was a playwright. And I wanted to be a journalist way back then. I'm 55. I'm just going to cop to how old I am. So in my 20s, I was also a playwright. And that came about because I decided to get my MFA. Right before I turned 50, I was like, I want to get my MFA in playwriting. And I did that because I'd heard, and it was sort of the thing at the time, that Hollywood was looking for playwrights because playwrights know how to tell stories. And it's a very different skill than the save the cat, like this happens on this page and this happens on this page. It's a different way of learning narrative. And they were sort of drawn to that. So I decided to get my MFA and sort of get back in the game of Hollywood, because I'd been out for a little while. And then I just fell back in love with it. And so I just threw myself into my MFA, and I started writing plays again, and submitting them around the country. And I started having some success. I had stuff developed at the Kennedy Center and the Goodman Theatre in Chicago, Provincetown Theater in Provincetown, here in Los Angeles at Antaeus Theatre and Celebration Theater. And I really started I'd had a career of writing children's theater for a long time, so I wasn't a stranger to this kind of thing. But it really satisfied my artistic soul, just to get dumb about it. And so I thought, why not? The thing that you would know about me if you've known me for a long time is when I decided to be an artist, I decided that it was okay if I was poor. And so my husband has a few, thoughts about that, but I've sort of changed that to I'm okay with being an under-earning person to pursue my art. And so there's like 2 living playwrights that make a living doing theater. Most every playwright you've ever heard of also teaches, or writes television or does something. But I just really felt like a playwright was where I wanted to be, and being a dramaturg and helping other playwrights and helping them, be a script, not doctor, but like a surgeon, I guess you'd say. And ironically enough, one of the plays that I wrote in my MFA that went to the Kennedy Center and has been produced around the country and is now published, somebody approached me about developing it as a pilot. So I just signed a deal to develop one of my plays as a pilot. So I got pulled back in.
But that's what I'm talking about. I think it's like you found what you love, you found what brings you joy. And now, because you've put sort of your whole heart into it, as you would say, dumb, it's turning in your favor. And so it's like instead of being a small fish in a big pond, you sort of found your own little pond. And now, you're getting some rewards from that.
Yeah, I find that, and not everybody has this luxury. I want to cop to that. Again, I say I'm an under-earning artist, but I'm married. You know what I mean? So I can do this. And so I don't want to say that, obviously this is about choosing your own path. And so just know that facilitates that for me. But I really it is impossible for me to spend a lot of time doing something that I don't like if if it's supposed to be using my creativity, which when we get to the reality TV portion of our discussion, I'll have a lot to say about that. And so I just sort of follow what I want to do, which is why I do like 5 million things. The other thing I'm doing right now is I'm writing a book. I was actually just working on it, this huge reference book that is about horror movies that have LGBTQI content. It's going to be this big reference book for McFarland Books coming out later this year. And that's another thing I wanted to do. And it's not screenwriting, it's not playwriting, but I'm like, but I want to do it. And
it's
so
writing.
I decided to do it. Right, it's writing, and that's my thing. I would rather be writing than anything else. I don't understand these people that are like, I like having written, but I hate writing. No, I love writing. I love doing it. Like if I ever have time off, I'm doing it. I do it on vacations. When my husband goes on business trips and he's like, leave the apartment, I don't, and I stay home and I write. Like it's the thing I just want to do. And so I sort of grab it from everywhere I can.
So what kinds of, before we go back to the beginning and we learn and we get into reality TV, the juiciness, what kinds of plays or what kinds of things are you drawn to writing? I know from what I've read and I see the names of like your stuff out, and it always makes me laugh because it's sort of in this like random weird, but it's always like horror related or like a little askew from like a fairy tale. So can you just talk about what your sort of genre is?
Sure. For a long time, I did what we call TYA, or theater for young audiences, because I just feel it's so important that kids have art in their lives. And if they want to do theater, that they have good stuff to work with. And so early on, back in my 20s, I was writing for adults, and then I accidentally wrote a play that high school started doing. And then I was like, oh, well, wait, what's this about? And I did some investigating, and I found out that there's a lot of garbage theater for kids out there, but schools are hungry for it. So I formed this company where I would reach out to high schools and be like, hey, do you need a play? And they'd be like, yes, we have 13 girls and 2 boys, and we need a play about bullying that also incorporates Shakespeare. And I'd be like, great, I will write that play for you. And that's almost exactly a pitch that I got from a school. And I'll write that play for you for free. You'll put it up, and then I'll have a play that's production tested, and I'll send it off to my publisher, and it will be published, and then it will make money, passive income down the road. So I did that for and still do occasionally for a solid 15 years when from my mid 20s to when I started my MFA. And I still do it occasionally. But when I got my MFA, I decided to, write for adults again. But I'm fascinated with, and I'm a science fiction person, I'm a horror person, so that's always sort of percolating in the background. But my thing is, what do ordinary people do in extraordinary circumstances? And what if that extraordinary circumstance is literally that the world will completely change by the end of the play? So it's like, there's a movie called Dark City where the characters in the movie find out that they're living on an island in space. And that's, the end, it's like, oh, okay, well, the world is now an island in space. I love those movies. I love those stories where the world completely changes at the end, and how does an ordinary person react to that? So one of my plays for kids that's really popular is called End of the World with Prom to Follow, which is literally about a town this may sound familiar. There's a certain TV show that I swear ripped me off, but a town where all the parents disappear, and there's a wall of light around the town, and the wall is slowly closing in over a school year, and the kids are trying to find out, and in the end it does close and all the kids disappear. But in the meantime, it's like, how would high school kids react to that? What would they do? So that's kind of my thing. Awesome. Ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Tell us how you decided you wanted to be, because you said you started as a playwright. What sort of was the thing that made you want to be a playwright or get into the entertainment industry, whatever?
I was always a theater kid. So I went to college to be an actor, and then I quit college. Best decision I ever made. I quit college after 4 years to move to Chicago because I had these dreams of being in Second City. I thought, I'm going to be in Second City. I'm just going to walk in and they're going to hire me for Second City. And that did not work out necessarily, but I got involved in the improv world there. And I realized really quickly that improv is writing. It's just, you're doing it on your feet and you're not, putting it on paper.
Right.
That metamorphosed into starting a theater company with friends called the Factory Theater, celebrating its 30th year anniversary this year. And it was all original material. We just started writing because we wanted to write. We had no we were improv people, but we're just like, let's just write plays. And that really took off. And we became one of the sort of well-known theaters in Chicago at the time. And through that, I got a job. I don't know if anybody remembers the CD-ROM game called You Don't Know Jack. It was really big in the mid to late 90s. It was this trivia game, and that was produced in Chicago. And I got a job on that game, writing content. Oh yeah,
Scott knew Jack.
Yeah, and we were like the toast of. Like everybody wanted a piece of You Don't Know Jack. It was so popular. So getting that job was like golden ticket. And I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. I was like, didn't have to have a day job. I was just on the writing staff that $500 a week. That's what I was making on there. And I was like, I'm rich. And hi, Harley from Chicago. I love the Factory Theater. Oh, with the Gottlieb brothers. So Tom and Harry Gottlieb, just mentioned in the chat, are the people that founded the company that did You Don't Know Jack. And that was a great job. And I was writing for a living. Like I was suddenly like a staff writer on something. And I tried to unionize the shop. And the president of the company was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I want to write for TV, because I sort of wanted to write for TV. And he's like, well, let me introduce you to this agent friend of mine in Los Angeles. And he did. And our Christmas bonus that year basically fueled my move to Los Angeles, where I signed with that agent that he had introduced me to. And I look back on that and I think he was just trying to get me out of there.
Yeah. Get him to LA.
Right.
No unionizing.
That's sort of the path. So it was like, wanted to be an actor, but always sort of kind of wanted to write. And then it happened. And then I was doing it. And then I got this great opportunity. And then I moved to Los Angeles with absolutely no plan, but not realizing what a blessing it was to have an agent before I even got here. Like,
right.
People try for years. So, yeah.
And how did that work out with that first agent?
He was my one and only agent, and it worked out pretty well for a while. And I learned a couple things during that process, which, I moved out here without any support system, like nothing. And a bunch of us from my theater company, the Factory Theater, sort of moved out here at the same time, but none of us had any connections or anything. We were just sort of moving out, but I had this agent. And so I let him sort of guide my career, right? And so it started out with game shows. I was writing game shows because that's what I'd done on You Don't Know Jack. That was an easy sort of move over. And I ended up on a Disney game show for Disney Channel called Mad Libs, based on Mad Libs, the game. And through that connection, I got a chance to pitch myself to the showrunners for a show called So Weird, which was like the kids' X-Files at the time. It would be. It hadn't started shooting yet. And I did that. Pitching is so different now. I'm hearing you talking about this pitch thing. I'm like, I'm gonna come to that, because pitching back then was so different, and getting jobs was so different. Anyway, I wrote a Buffy spec. So we had a spec script. So I wrote a Buffy spec, and it was Willow had a gay friend. So that was back then. And that got me some work. So that got me in the door.
Was that before Willow was gay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really early. So this was like 1990. I moved in 97. That probably happened in either 98 or 99.
Yeah. Okay.
So Buffy was, sort of in the first phase of the show.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I oh my God, I think about this. So I'm pitching, I go in to pitch my episodes, right? They like my specs, they like my spec script. Disney ran a different kind of ship back then. They didn't have a writer's room. They had a showrunner, and then all the scripts were freelance, but you kind of worked like a writer's room. So I went into pitched some episodes, and they chose one, and they started talking out the beats like you know, breaking story in a room, and and they're like, aren't you going to take any notes? I'm like, no, I think I got it. and suddenly I realized, oh no, I need to be taking notes. I'm responsible for this. And so I, you know, quickly I'm like writing down all this stuff. And then they're like, okay, great. And I went home and I called my agent. And I'm like, what do I do next? Like, I had no idea. Like, well, because they didn't tell me, they just assumed that I knew. Again, I had no training, nothing. And I'd written a TV spec, but I copied like a Buffy template. Like that was it. And so he's like, well, you probably write a beat sheet, and then they'll approve that, and then you'll probably write an outline. I thought I just went straight to script. Anyway,
right.
That was my first narrative job, and I wrote 4 episodes of that show over like the next 2.5 years. And that, I mean, again, I'd never seen that much money in my life. Like I went from making $500 a week in Chicago to getting paid like $16,000 for these scripts, these half-hour scripts, which was low, you know, at the time, but I still was like, whoa, this is great. This is amazing. And the thing I learned, you asked me what I learned, was in retrospect,
right,
I should have been doing more to make sure I stayed on that path. I did, because I just trusted, I just thought that my agent would be like getting me out there for all these things. And so if it wasn't happening, I'm like, oh, well, so nothing must be happening right now, which what I should have been doing was like making more contacts and, you know, just seeking out other writers and other showrunners and, you know, finding shows and telling my agent, hey, will you send me out?
Right.
I was doing none of that.
Right. You were relying on your agent, thinking that he was like doing a bunch of stuff.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And what I realized now, of course, was his job was to like hold out the bucket and catch everything that I was throwing to him and the money. Right. And so I did a little of it, and I did, you know, keep doing some narrative stuff, but ultimately I took that turn into reality TV on his advice, and I should not have. Yeah.
Sean's big regret.
Yeah. I mean, it is my one, like, honestly, my one like regret is that I'd done reality TV because I'd done these game shows and things, and then I moved on from it. But then, as you probably remember, reality was sort of becoming really popular, and they were replacing narrative shows with reality shows. And these reality shows were cheaper, but they still had pretty big budgets. So I could still like make my Writers Guild, you know, minimums. And so I did it for the money, just thinking, oh, these other things will come through. And then suddenly it's like a decade later. And I mean, I did have other stuff in there. I was selling some pilots, and I was writing for other companies and doing some other narrative stuff. But if we're looking at like the bigger picture, that was like the thing that I wish I had not done at the time.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, like it's the same, because I was sort of on a path of, I was working for managers. I was kind of like figuring out what I wanted to do. And then I started working in reality TV. And then it just was like 12 years later, I'm like, wait, I'm still doing this. And I can't jump. I can't just jump over to producing scripted because they don't take me seriously in the same way. It's just, which in reality shows are harder in some ways because you have $0.
Right. And you, like, the time it would take to get out of that genre, like you have to do it around these jobs that take 12, 14, 16 hours a day when you're shooting. And, you know, back then, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, but yeah, it was really, you know, and so, yeah. And especially in Los Angeles, this is weird. I'm just going to be weird side. So, but time passes here differently. Because every day is sunny and 80 degrees. And so you don't understand the passage of time. And so suddenly it's 10 years later. Right?
Here we are.
Right, here we are. And I did that jump, and I worked on a show on which I was so miserable. And I realized this is killing me. It's killing me. It's killing my soul. And it was a home renovation show, and I was writing not only the host drafts, but I was writing like what they were shooting to, right? They would go and interview the families, get all the information, and then I would write, here's the beats that you should be shooting to, and we sort of, a light framework. And we went to interview this family, and we not only had to like fix their house, we had to fix their family, and so we had to find a conflict in the family, and there really wasn't one in this amazing family that we'd found. And so I went back to the executive producer and I said, I just don't think they're on board with this thing that we've come up, like the dad and the daughter fighting. I just don't think they're on board. Are we allowed to swear on here? Because I'm about to swear.
Yeah, sure.
And she said to me, we're giving them a fucking house. They'll do whatever the fuck we want. And that, I get a little choked up thinking about that, because that was the moment that I'm like, I have to get out. I have to get out, because these people are good people, and they deserve a house. They don't deserve the rest of what they're about to get.
Yeah.
And that was my last regular gig.
I had that same kind of thing. Yeah. The last show that I worked on was a dating show, and it was a blind sort of dating show. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to set up this one woman with a guy, and they wanted a segment and she was a bit overweight, and they wanted her to be sitting there waiting, and for him to walk by, and for him to look at her and say no and turn around and leave.
Oh.
And I literally went to the executive producer and I said, I'm not doing that. And she goes, well, why? That's your job. And I said, it's not my job, and shouldn't be doing this. And I remember like I didn't do it, and it got canceled. And it was like that moment where I'm like, what am I doing? This is like, my soul is dying. Like, this is not what I want to be doing. Yeah. It just got dirty there for a while. I don't know what it's doing now, but.
Well, do you remember the time on She's Got the Look, and they aired this where the contestant had the meltdown and stripped naked and I remember we were in the control room, and it was panel day, and we got the, in the ear, like, oh, one of the contestants is really freaking out. She won't get dressed for the show, and she's coming in sweatpants. And we're like, okay. And they were doing camera blocking, and she went crazy. That's not fair. I want to say crazy. She had a meltdown. And she went crazy. Yeah. And I was with her after. Okay. And she took off all of her clothes. And as she was taking off her clothes, I was sitting in the control room, and they're like, roll, 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 roll. And they rolled cameras on her, and they put it on TV. And I look back on that, and I just think, what did we do to that woman's life? I'm going to make you feel better. That's what she wanted. Oh, really? I was with her afterwards. Yes. And that's what she wanted. She spent 2 hours telling me that I was the devil's, like a bunch of crazy stuff. Like it didn't penetrate. And it could have, but it didn't, because she that's exactly what she wanted. She came on the show to create a moment like that. So don't feel bad for her. All right. Screw it then. All right. Anyway, so when you were in reality and you were writing host copy and now like whole episodes and stuff, when did you shift back again? Is that when you started your MBA? You were like, I'm done with this? No, I got a job. So when I was a young actor in Montana, where I grew up in Montana. I was in summer stock, being an actor, making money. And 20 years later, one of the women who was in the company with me at the time was now running the company. And we did all original oldie-timey shows. There was this old Western town, and so it was all these like melodramas. And she's like, do you want to write one for us? I'm like, sure. Because she knew that at that point I'd like done some playwriting. And so I wrote a play called Dracula's Daughters, a family comedy. And it was about Dracula and Mina. They got together and they had kids, and now they're living in the suburbs. And it was super family friendly and fun. And great. It was great. I was suddenly back in my element. And then I managed to get that script published. And then high school started doing it. And so suddenly I was back to
wait, I want to stop you. When you say you got your plays published, tell us what that means. Like, where are they published? Like, what's that world? Because I don't know the published play world.
Sure. It's been very democratized, much like a lot of things, courtesy of the internet. It used to only be like two publishing companies, like Sam French and Dramatic Publishing or whatever was at the time. And your play had to like literally one of my rejection letters from Samuel French back in the day was, make sure your play succeeds on the island of Manhattan. So it was really tough to get anything published if it was regional. That's very different now. So
I think that was films back then too. It was like, if you succeed in Manhattan, then you can go wide.
Right. Basically what happens is there's all these play publishing houses. The one I'm going to talk about is called Play Scripts. And they were a company that was founded by a playwright who'd written like one of the most produced plays for teenagers that's ever been written. It's called Check Please. And he founded this company for plays like that, like for, family friendly plays for high schools and stuff. So I knew about this company. So after my play was produced, which was a lucky stroke of, luck, I guess you'd say, I sent it to the publishing company because they had a, open submission, like submit your play here. And what they needed to know was that it had been produced and the production credits. So like, all the original actors and when it was produced and what theater, because they wanted to know that it was production tested.
Okay.
Which is very important in the play publishing world. They want to know that it's been on its feet and had all the kinks worked out before they get it.
Sure.
So I sent it to them, and typical play publishing turnaround is 6 to 8 months. So I waited, I can't even remember how long now, because that was one of my early ones. And then they said yes. And then there was the, like just making, like proofing it all and, getting all the information that goes in the front of the script. Sidebar, when I was a kid actor and I would open these scripts from Sam French, anybody who's been an actor knows this. It's like in the front is like the original production and the names of the people that were in the original production. And I literally would just dream of having my name in a play like that one day. And now my name's on the cover, which is even better.
It's awesome.
So that's the process. Really, it typically has to be produced first, and then you send it to them with the proof of production, and then you wait 6 to 8 months, and hopefully they sign you. And then the contract you sign, they vary, but typically I think the sort of ethical split on performance licensing fees is, I think it's 60-40 playwright. The playwright gets 60 and the publisher gets 40. And there's different things like physical copies of the script, you get like 20 and they get 80, or maybe it's the other way around. I'd have to look at my contracts, but there's different for each way that it's purchased. There's different percentages, and the Dramatists Guild, the playwriting guild has a hand in sort of making sure, I mean, there's no rule, but there's kind of ethical guidelines along those lines. And then it becomes, passive income. I get checks all throughout the year for all these plays that I have published that are being done all over the country and all over the world.
Somebody could, like, if somebody was a play production company and they found your play, then they could go make that, and then you would just get fees from that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I know nothing. I know nothing of this world, but I like it. Okay, so then let's talk about, because I know you did this side bar thing with Fangoria, where you tell me about that.
Okay, so the other thing that I do is, so I'm the kind of person, like I said, I like to write all the time. So I had always dreamed of being a journalist, and a friend of mine was one of the editors at The Advocate. And so he hired me for my first magazine articles, and they were typically horror movie related. And I'm a big horror movie fan. I consider myself a horror movie journalist. So a lot of my work appears in a magazine called Fangoria. But I got there through the gay press, like doing stuff for The Advocate and Unzipped. And again, I had no training. I just decided I was going to do it.
I think that's the lesson. Just dive in, right?
You know what? Here's the thing.
Just dive in.
I had never taken a writing class until my MFA. I mean, yes, I'd been in improv classes, but I'd literally never taken a writing class until then. I just did it on my instincts. And I don't regret that. I love that I got my MFA because I have new tools in my toolbox that I can use. But, I read how to write a screenplay in 21 days, and which even the author says, this is not a book on how to write an amazing screenplay in 21 days. It's just
right,
a book
it's just
on how
getting
to
some
write
words
one.
out. Right.
Yeah. So, God, where was I? Oh, so Fangoria, I'd been reading it since I was a teenager. And one day, out of the blue, on the set of She's Got the Look too, oh my gosh, I completely forgot this. I get a call from the editor of Fangoria, who we'd gotten to know each other through like conventions and stuff. And he called me. It was when we were shooting the zoo. Remember, we're shooting the zoo, and like, I like to say, it's like the model who got shit on by a parrot was consoling the model who got bit by a monkey. And as I'm watching this happen, my phone rings and I answer, and it's the editor, and he's like, would you like to write a blog, a gay horror blog?
Yes, please.
And I said, absolutely. I was so miserable. And that was like, it was like the sun, came out, and that was 2009. And the blog started in 2009. I maybe we weren't shooting through 2009. I can't remember exactly.
2008, 2009, something like that. Yeah.
And so I started writing the Gay of the Dead gay horror blog for Fangoria, and that led to writing articles for the magazine over the years. It led to a book that I put out called Out in the Dark, which is interviews with gay horror filmmakers. Is it behind me? Am I going to do
awesome.
That thing? Oh my gosh.
Yes, do it. Hold it up. I actually am going to get that because I want to read it.
This is my first book. Well, and not including the plays. And I've just been doing it ever since, on and off. Mostly with Fangoria, because I love the magazine, and I've really enjoyed working with the various editors. And currently, I'm working on a couple different things for them literally as we speak.
That's awesome. We put the link for that book in the chat, everybody.
Cool.
Did you know that my father-in-law is Charles Band?
No.
Horror guy. Yeah.
If I could reach it, I would pull his autobiography, which is literally by my toilet right now.
Yeah.
That is insanity. Oh my gosh. Well, tell him I want to work for him. I've been trying to write a script for that guy forever.
I will do an introduction. Next time he has a party, I'm going to invite you, because I think that you'd have a good time with him.
That's so funny. He's actually seen the one movie that I wrote and directed. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't talk about in between.
Yeah, that's a good segue into there. Yes.
Yeah. So again, doing something I'd never done before, I'd never been trained for. I was working on that terrible home renovation show, and a friend of mine said, who was also in reality, said, I want to make a movie. I want to make a short. And I'd been sort of thinking about like getting into film, and I'm like, I'll produce it. And so I produced this short, and I had no idea what I was doing. Like at one point, he asked
This is the theme of the whole conversation. Is you say yes, you have no idea what you're doing. I love it. Right. But that's how you should be, honestly.
I feel like, if you like, there's some
you do know.
Right. I feel like I had some instincts, but like some of the things, like he said on our first day, should we put out a call sheet? I'm like, nah, you don't need a call sheet. For a movie, we didn't need a call sheet to let people know where they needed to be at the set. So I learned how to produce on this short, and it was a big short. There was a lot of moving parts, and it was too long to be a short, right. My philosophy is if it takes more than a weekend to shoot your short, you're like wasting your time and money. But I learned, like, I worked with a really great DP on that, and the executive producer, she produced that, I want to say it was Untangled, like some giant animated feature right after that. Like I was working with people that were way more experienced than I was. And from there, I met somebody else who wanted me to produce their feature, and I produced it. I'm not putting in money, by the way. I'm just like putting it together.
Yeah, creative producer. Yeah.
And it was a low budget movie for like $9,000. We like shot a feature for $9,000 over a week, and that became like a festival, like perennial. And then I got another job, and then another one, and the budget sort of went up and up, and then finally I'd had a screenplay that I'd written ages ago. It was a gay science fiction screenplay called Socket. And I thought, it's time for me to do this movie. It's time for me to put it together. And I never directed anything. I asked my ex-boyfriend, my boyfriend at the time, who was a director, to direct it. But I was like, but there's things that I want in it. There's things that I really want specifically. So I might sort of be over your shoulder. And of course he was like, uh-huh. So I was driving home from Arizona, where I'd produced a movie called Gay Bed and Breakfast of Terror.
I love these titles that you throw out there.
And
Gay Bed and Breakfast of Terror.
Right, yes.
It's a gem.
Oh boy, it sure is. Which I'm in, actually, at the very end. And I was just driving home exhausted, and I just came to him, was like, I just need to direct this movie. On the set of Gay Bed and Breakfast of Terror, the director who also wrote it was in the movie. And so there were times when I would literally like call the shots just because I was there.
Sure.
And I thought, I can do that. I can do that for a whole movie. So on the way home from Gay Bed and Breakfast of Terror, I called my now ex-boyfriend, and at the time he was my ex, and said, you know what? I'm gonna let you off the hook. I'm gonna direct this movie. And so I directed my first movie. When I got back, I raised $45,000 and made a movie.
And how was that? What'd you do with it?
We shot it in 9 days. And I really was, because now I'd produced a bunch of these low budget movies, and so I knew how to like do that, right? Like, so we had 4 locations, and I scouted the locations so each location could be like 5 locations, right? So the camera's pointed this way, and it's one location. The camera's pointed this way, it's another one, this one, this way.
Smart.
And
did you learn that in reality TV?
How did you raise money at that time? Good question. I paid for that movie with my unemployment checks and some friends. I call them the vegans. There's some friends of mine. They're a vegan couple, a gay vegan couple, wanted to get into film production. And so we chatted, and they brought in some money as well. And then my now husband also put in a little bit of money. And yeah, so that's, we just sort of, I mean, it was $45,000, which it felt like a gajillion dollars, but it really was, not very much.
Yeah. Did you make it back or no?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
But this is back in 2006, and
Yeah.
it was, you were still getting MGs, minimum guarantees, from distributors. So we got $20,000 up front. So we were already halfway there, basically. But yeah, we submitted it to film festivals, and one of the film festivals was connected to a distributor. It was the TLA. And so that was their way of sort of like getting films that they could look at and see if they wanted to distribute. So I submitted it to them, and we hadn't heard if we got into the festival or not. So I called just to find out, did we get into the festival? Because we had also gotten into Outfest, and I needed to figure out which one was going to be the premiere, which was happening first. And they sort of talk to each other, festival.
Yeah.
And so the president of the company just happened to answer the phone. He's like, oh yeah, we want it. And I realized what he meant was he wanted to distribute it. So that was it. So that was that. And
what was it called?
The movie's called Socket. S-O-C-K.
Oh, Socket. Okay, that one. Okay.
It's about people putting electrical sockets into their body and plugging in to each other for sexual purposes. Yeah. Gay sexual purposes for the most part. It was a gay movie. And that movie took me on the festival circuit, and then I got even more production jobs from that. I never thought that I would be the filmmaker who only made one film as a director, but that's been the case. I haven't directed another movie since, and quite frankly, I don't necessarily want to. That was the one thing I enjoyed producing, although it became kind of a grind at that budget level. But I didn't love directing as much of a control freak as I am. So I've done it again.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about currently. You told me about this playwright retreat that you're going to do. So I want to talk about that, but then I want to talk about any words of wisdom or advice for writers, even writers in the LGBTQ community, of finding your way through the industry. And I mean, I think we've talked about, a big theme of this was that you just said yes to things and then just tried them, even if you didn't. I think because for me, especially as a woman, I think we've been ingrained with this idea that you have to follow every step correctly to get to the next place. And if you aren't ready, you kind of like, wait, I'm not ready. And I really try to push myself to not be that way, but it's scary because I'm like, but I'm not ready to do.
Right.
Yes, just go, just say yes and do it, So first let's talk about your retreat, and then let's dive into some final kind of thoughts and answer these two questions.
Well, and I can wrap sort of that what we we're just talking about into this as well. The thing I love about being a writer is that you don't have to wait for somebody to tell you can write. And that's one of the reasons why I sort of put my acting career aside when I moved to Los Angeles, because I didn't want to have to like
wait for other people to hire you. Yeah.
Quick sidebar. A very smart acting teacher once told me, if you want to be in TV and film, find yourself in TV and film, and that's what you're going to be doing, because TV and film isn't brave. It's unlike theater where you can do all this great. Your TV and film isn't brave. And right before I moved to Los Angeles, I saw a commercial with a fat guy who I've since met, actually, a fat guy dancing to the song Maniac from Flashdance because he loved tacos. And he looked like me. Yeah, this was like 96 or 7. And I saw that commercial and the guy looks like me. And I thought, I don't want to be the fat guy dancing because he loves tacos. Like, I don't, and I'm not like saying that that's not a good gig to have or that like I'm above it. I just don't want to do it. And I also really don't want to be the person auditioning for that, like begging you to let me dance because I love tacos. And so I sort of put my acting career aside and writing became my fulfilling thing, because you don't have to wait for people to tell you.
Right.
And so this writing retreat that you talk about, much like everything that I've decided I want to do, I just don't wait for people to tell me to do it. I just do it, and to varying degrees of success. And so a friend of mine had created an artist retreat, an LGBTQIA artist retreat in Fire Island. It's called Fire Island Artist Residency. And he just did it. He just like raised the money and did it. And I was talking to him. I was like, I really want to do this as like for playwrights, gay playwrights, because I feel like we need more gay space. And he's like, just do it. I was like, right. Okay. And so I rented a house in Palm Springs and put the word out that I wanted to do this retreat. And people were like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then now I have a retreat. And it's a little bit more involved in that now. Sure. But that was the beginning. It was literally just like, hey, let's all go out to the desert and write. And we'll just, like have quiet writing during the day and, share work at night. And it will be playwriting because everybody out here is writing a screenplay, but I'm more of a playwright right now and I need to be around my people. Sure. And and so that's how it started. And now it's become the Desert Playwrights Retreat. And it's expanded beyond, originally it was just going to be gay men, because I feel like with everything that's happening in the world right now, gay men people kind of think we're good. Like, you got gay marriage, you're all set. We're moving on to the next thing. That's just not true. Like, we all still need to be moving forward as we bring the people that we left behind, like trans people and stuff. We also need to sort of like be making sure that we're getting what we're owed. Right. But I've expanded the retreat to be the whole, queer alphabet, and I've incorporated, and we're working with a nonprofit, so donations can be tax deductible, and it'll happen a couple times a year. And the cohorts we've done it 3 times so far, and the cohorts that have been there have just absolutely loved it. And yeah, I think I want that to be like my job. Cool. I want that to be, when I was bemoaning not getting a lot of my own work done, Chris Boja, this friend of mine that started, he's like, well, your arts advocacy can also be your artistic practice. And that really like, bing. And so, yeah, I get a lot of fulfillment for like facilitating it for other playwrights.
That's awesome. I love that. If people wanted to find out about your retreat, how could they reach you? What's the best way?
Right this minute, you can find me on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram, all under my name, Sean Abley, and just let me know and I can point you in the right direction. We're going to have a website. It's so funny that this should come up now, because the website's literally going to launch within like the next week or so. Cool. And it will be Desert Playwrights Retreat But in the meantime, just find me on one of those other things and just let me know. It's for queer people, so that's the one bar to entry. But other than that, it's it's going to be rolling and rocking very soon.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that you want to share about writing in general? I mean, I think one of the, from our conversation, really admirable things about you, among many, is that you just keep writing. You just love to write, and you're just writing all the time. So is there anything else that you think are sort of like keys to success, or like finding your happiness in this crazy creative, world that we are in?
It's funny because I've always considered writing like my rope ladder out of a burning building. Like I remember I would have some rejection when I first got here, and I would feel bummed, and I would start writing again. And I would tell and my agent was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm just going back in because that makes me happy." I think that, well, much like I said before, like you don't have to have somebody tell you to do it, and you should just run toward things that scare you. Like I was terrified to get my MFA because I dropped out of college, and I found this program that would allow me to like come in without a BFA, and so I'd like never written a paper, that kind of thing. But I just ran toward it, and it worked out great. And so I think like the whole running toward things that scare you is really important. Also, like I don't have a lot of advice about how to move through the industry, but my advice for artists is that what's going on, everything that happens in the world, every big sort of movement or historical change or political change, art is involved. Like art is how it's communicated. It's how we look back on it. It's how we know what happened, and it's how we get the message out when other people will try to stop it. And so it's really important right now and always to like flood the world with art, right? It's our responsibility to do that. And I'm not saying from one political viewpoint or the other, it's to record the time, right? We are the historians. It takes, you have to be able to write a history book, and that is an art form. So we are the people that, are in charge of that. So I look upon it as a great responsibility. Like, this is the thing I can do. I'm terrible at math. I am fundamentally lazy when it comes to physical labor. But the thing that I can do is write. And so I look past, like, of course I want to sell this TV show. Of course I want to like sell a movie again and have my stuff produced in big theaters. And that's just perseverance. But the like integrity of being an artist is to understand how you affect the world and how you can filter it through your art, and to make sure that you do that because it's bigger than you are.
That's awesome. That made me think of, I wanted to ask you, where do you find your confidence to sort of, I feel like a lot of, especially the titles that I've read of things that you've written, it feels like a lot of them are the, and I will cuss now, the like fuck it script, where you're like, it's odd, or it's a little bit weird. It's not mainstream, it's not, and that's wonderful. So where do you think you find your confidence to say, okay, I'm going to write a movie about people who put sockets in their body and connect it to somebody else? Like, where does that, what advice do you have about being okay with just like, okay, this might be a strange idea, or this might be something that's maybe not, like the Avengers. Where do you find that confidence?
I think that for me, the art that speaks to me is people that have written their truth, right? I mean, anytime you create art, you're confessing, right? Even if you're trying not to, even if it's like a for hire gig or something like that, in some way you're confessing. But the stuff that really lands, I think, and if you look at, even if like the Academy Awards and things like that, like where it registers with people, it's the stuff that is your truth, right? Again, yep. It's like a kind of annoying thing that we talk about now. And so for me, those are my ideas. Like, those are, anytime that I've tried to write something to spec, right? And it's like to some, like somebody says, write this script. and they hand me an assignment. It's like, it's just painful. So I kind of can do nothing but, right? And so again, I have the luxury of like being able to write these weird scripts and like send them out in the world. But I feel like ultimately, in the sort of framework of this business that we're in, people, even though it feels gross, and even it feels like when you're pitching, like maybe people don't understand or they're looking for this commercial thing, I think ultimately, if you can convince them you're telling them your truth, that they will respond to that and take a swing at it. You know, there was a period of TV where it was like everybody was trying to out weird everybody else. Like there was the show about polygamy, Big Love, but that was a huge hit. And there's a show about the guy with the giant penis called Hung, but that was, and it's like, and now there's this one about like basically Playgirl, like Minx. Like there are these ideas that I think if you were to sort of come up with them and pitch them trying to be shocking, maybe they wouldn't land. But I'm sure the people behind these are like, no, this is like the story I want to tell, and they convince somebody to do it. So I
find the heart, find the truth inside of whatever idea you have.
Right.
And you find that connection, how your truth can connect to somebody else's truth, even set in a world of, wherever.
And you can put in those weird ideas, like in all my weird idea scripts, there's always the kernel of human truth, right? Like there's sort of something about people in there. I love this thing, like Showgirls, a really bad movie. Arguably, but I think the reason why that movie didn't land in people's hearts originally was because it was mercenary, right? It was like this thing that was created to be Showgirls, but then it was reclaimed as a really great movie. But the thing in the movie, I will say, is the lead. Why am I forgetting her name?
Elizabeth Berkley.
Elizabeth Berkley. She's not pretending. She's like selling that, like she put her whole heart into that movie. And upon review, I think if we look at her in that movie, we're like, oh my God, she's actually great. You know what I mean? Like people love her now for that. So, am I talking on my ass? Like I don't like to be the philosopher, but that's just sort of where I land.
That's what I like. I'm like this. I'm like, okay, let's talk some more. We do have to end pretty soon. So there's a couple questions. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer these, but one is when you do paid writing work, do you work remote or do you go?
Everything's remote now, even if it doesn't have to be. So yeah, I mean the thing I'm working on for this TV show out of my play, we're just sort of exchanging stuff. Yeah, the world's changed. It's all going to be remote. Although I think I haven't staffed in a while, but I think most of the people I know that are staffing, that are working in rooms are still remote. So.
Yeah. Some are returning and some are still remote. It's kind of like a big mix. Okay. So this one, I feel like it was written, the first question in the Q&A, I feel like it was written while we were talking about something, but I'm not quite sure where it landed, but I think it's a question basically saying, okay, it says, is it the same situation today for writers in LA, Hollywood compared to pre-COVID? Keep lining up and never have a studio executive see your script, or has it changed for good? I think what it's saying is like writing, and then like, how do you get your stuff out there?
Well, I will tell you, one thing that's really changed is how you pitch a show. It used, back in my day, back when I was actually selling pilots, you came up with your pitch, you wrote your 2-pager, and you went in and you pitched in person, and if they liked it, you left your leave behind. Sure. And then they got back to you, and then you went through the process of like, they're like, okay, we're going to do this, but it was broken down into go to outline, now go to script, and then whatever.
Right.
Now there's this thing called a pitch deck.
Yes.
Which I think sometimes they see even before they see you, like that. It just sort of
sometimes. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a whole different thing, and also it was starting to happen when I was really pitching, but now it's really happened is like nobody pays you any development money anymore. Like there are, unless you can get to like a big production company or actual network, they're all like, this is interesting, but we'd be more interested if it was X, Y, and Z, and they're not like offering you money to develop it. They're telling you to go rewrite it and hand it back to them.
Yes.
Which sucks. And the Writers Guild is always like anti that, but that's kind of how it works these days.
Because no one wants to read a script actually right now. They just want to see the idea and then.
Yeah. Also, after pandemic, socially, we have changed. And so the priorities of a lot of the networks and like the Netflixes and stuff like that has changed. So who's getting in the room has really changed right now. And that may or may not sort of shake back to some in between version of now and what it used to be.
Sure.
But yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time that we have today. If you guys, like Sean mentioned earlier, if you want to reach out to him, find him on social media. Sean Abley on Twitter. He is Gay of the Dead. So go there and follow him also. And Sean, I want to hang out with you in person. So let's, I would like to chat some more.
I'm ready. Like
Okay, cool.
I'm out and about. I'm drinking coffee in.
Okay, good. in a restaurant. Okay. So I'll reach out to you for that. But thanks everybody for being here. Check out our event page for future events, like I mentioned in the beginning, and we will see you next time.